There's an hour every day that shapes your life more than anything you do while awake. The hour before sleep. Most people waste it, scrolling, replaying the day's arguments, letting the mind drift, unfiltered. Carl Jung discovered something different about this hour. He believed the unconscious mind isn't random noise. It's intelligent, structured, constantly trying to communicate, through dreams, through sudden images that surface right before sleep. Most people never receive this communication, not because it isn't sent, because they never learned to listen. Jung built a specific nightly exercise to open that channel. He used it himself for decades, and credited it with his most important insights. Today, we walk through exactly how to do it tonight. Part 1. The forgotten layer of the mind. To understand the exercise, you first have to understand what Jung believed about the structure of the human psyche. Most people think of the mind as having two parts: the conscious, what you are aware of right now, reading these words, thinking these thoughts, and the unconscious, a vague, undefined storage space for things you've forgotten or repressed. Jung's model was far more sophisticated than this. He believed the unconscious was not simply a storage room. It was an active, intelligent system, constantly processing, constantly generating meaning, constantly attempting to communicate with the conscious mind through symbols. And he divided it further. The personal unconscious, the layer containing your specific memories, your repressed experiences, the material unique to your individual life. And beneath that, something far stranger. The collective unconscious, a layer Jung believed was shared across all human beings, containing patterns, images, and structures that recur across every culture, every era, every mythology, regardless of whether the people creating them ever had contact with each other. Part 2. Why dreams alone are not enough. Most people who have heard of Jung associate him primarily with dream analysis, and dreams were, without question, central to his work. But Jung discovered something important. Dreams are unreliable as a sole method of accessing the unconscious, not because they aren't meaningful, but because of how they arrive. You cannot summon a dream. You cannot direct its content. You wake up, and it is already fading, slipping away within minutes, distorted by the act of remembering itself. This frustrated Jung. He wanted a more direct line, something he could initiate deliberately, rather than waiting passively for sleep to deliver whatever it decided to deliver. So he developed something different, a technique that would eventually become one of the foundational practices of his entire psychological system. Part 3. What active imagination actually is. Active imagination is not daydreaming. It is not visualization in the way most self-help content uses the term. Imagining a desired outcome, picturing success, manifesting a goal through repeated mental rehearsal. It is something stranger and, Jung believed, far more powerful. It is the deliberate practice of allowing unconscious material to surface into conscious awareness, while remaining conscious enough to engage with it directly. Think of it as occupying a state between waking and dreaming, awake enough to direct attention and remember what occurs, relaxed enough that the unconscious begins to offer images, figures, and scenes without the usual conscious filtering. Jung discovered this state by accident during one of the most difficult periods of his life. After his break with Sigmund Freud, a rupture that cost him his primary professional relationship, much of his reputation, and years of psychological stability, Jung entered what he later called his confrontation with the unconscious. He was, by his own description, on the edge of something resembling psychosis, flooded with images, voices, visions he could not explain or control. Rather than suppress this flood, which is what most psychological approaches of his time would have recommended, Jung made an unusual decision. Part 4. Why the unconscious speaks in symbols, not language. Before we walk through the exercise itself, there's one more piece of understanding you need. Because if you don't understand this, the exercise will feel strange and you'll likely dismiss what emerges from it as meaningless. The unconscious, Jung believed, does not think in words. It thinks in images, in symbols, in scenes that carry meaning, the way poetry carries meaning, not through literal statement, but through resonance, association, and felt significance. This is why dreams are often bizarre, not because the unconscious is malfunctioning, but because it is using a different language entirely, one your conscious, literal mind is not naturally fluent in. A figure in a dream is rarely meant to represent only that literal figure. A house is rarely just a house. A descending staircase is rarely just architecture. These are symbols, containers for meaning that must be approached the way you would approach a poem or a myth, not decoded with a dictionary, but felt, sat with, allowed to reveal their significance gradually. This is why the nightly exercise is not about generating answers in plain language. It is about generating images, and then sitting with those images long enough for their meaning to begin to surface. Part 5. The exercise itself. Here is the practice, broken into its complete sequence. Step 1. The transition. Roughly 30 minutes before you intend to sleep, stop all external input. No phone, no screens, no conversation. This is non-negotiable, and it is also the step most people skip, and the reason most attempts at this practice fail before they even begin. The unconscious does not surface easily through stimulation. It requires a specific kind of stillness, the same stillness Jung deliberately cultivated before his own sessions of active imagination. Sit or lie down in low light. Let your body settle. Let your breathing slow naturally, without forcing it. This is the transition zone, the doorway between the activity of the day and the deeper layer you are about to access. Step 2. The relaxation of conscious control. Once you are settled, begin to consciously relax your grip on directed thought. This is the part most people misunderstand. You are not trying to think of nothing. That is meditation, and it serves a different purpose. You are not trying to think of something specific. That is visualization, and it also serves a different purpose. You are doing something Jung described very precisely. You are allowing thought to occur without directing it. Let your mind drift without steering it toward any particular destination. Notice what arises, not by forcing yourself to notice, but by simply not interfering with whatever surfaces. Most people, in this state, will initially encounter the residue of the day, worries, replayed conversations, practical concerns. Step 3. The arrival of the image. At some point, sometimes quickly, sometimes after considerable patience, an image will arise that feels different from the ordinary drift of thought. It might be a figure, a place, a scene, an object. It will often feel slightly strange, not quite like ordinary imagination, but with a quality of having appeared rather than having been constructed. This is the moment the exercise actually begins. When this image arrives, do not immediately analyze it. Do not rush to interpret it. Simply, and this is the crucial instruction Jung gave again and again, stay with it. Look at it more closely. Notice its details. If it is a figure, notice how it is positioned, what it seems to be doing, what quality of presence it carries. Resist, for now, the urge to assign it meaning. The meaning will come, but not yet. Step 4. Active engagement. This is the step that separates active imagination from ordinary daydreaming, and it is the most important part of the entire exercise. Once the image has stabilized, once you have a clear sense of it, begin to engage with it directly. If it is a figure, you can address it, not out loud necessarily, though Jung sometimes did speak aloud during his own sessions. Internally is sufficient. Ask it a simple, open question. Who are you? What do you want? What are you here to show me? And then, this is the part that requires real practice and real patience. Wait for a response. Not a response you construct deliberately. A response that arises the way the original image arose. Unbidden, slightly surprising, carrying a quality different from ordinary thought. This will feel strange the first several times you attempt it. You may find that nothing arises. You may find that what arises feels like you're simply making it up. Jung addressed this directly in his own writings. He acknowledged that the line between genuine unconscious material and conscious fabrication is not always clear, especially at first. But he insisted on something important. Even material that feels constructed often contains genuine unconscious content woven through it. And with practice, the distinction between authentic and fabricated material becomes increasingly clear. The skill, like any skill, develops with repetition. Step 5. Following the scene. If the engagement continues, if the figure responds, if the scene develops, if something seems to want to unfold further, follow it. Let the dialogue or the scene continue without forcing a particular direction. If the figure begins to walk somewhere, let yourself follow. If the scene shifts, let it shift. If new figures or elements appear, let them appear. You are, in this state, functioning as a kind of conscious witness to a process that is largely directing itself. This is the part of the exercise that most resembles Jung's own experience during his confrontation with the unconscious. A scene unfolding with its own internal logic, strange, sometimes unsettling, but coherent in a way that ordinary daydreaming rarely achieves. Let it continue for as long as it naturally sustains itself. There is no fixed duration. Some sessions will be brief, a single image, a few moments of engagement. Others will unfold considerably further. Step 6. The closing. When the scene naturally concludes, when the engagement feels complete, or when you feel yourself drifting toward actual sleep, let it close gently. Do not force an ending. Do not rush to wrap things up with a tidy resolution. Simply allow the natural conclusion, whatever form it takes. If you are still awake enough, take a moment of stillness before moving. Let what occurred settle, the way you would let a piece of music finish before speaking again. Step 7. The record. This final step is, in Jung's view, almost as important as the exercise itself. Before you fully release into sleep, or first thing upon waking, if the exercise carries you directly into sleep, record what occurred. Not extensively, not as a performance of detailed journaling, simply enough to preserve the core images, the central exchange, the essential shape of what arose. A few sentences, a sketch, if you are inclined toward images rather than words, enough that the material is not lost to the rapid fading that claims most unconscious content within minutes of its arising. Jung was relentless about this recording practice throughout his own life. The Red Book exists specifically because he refused to let his own active imagination sessions evaporate unexamined. Part 6. Why this exercise actually works. Let's step back from the mechanics and understand the psychology beneath them. Why would a practice like this produce genuine insight, rather than simply being an elaborate form of self-deception? Jung's answer involved several converging principles. First, the unconscious processes information the conscious mind cannot hold simultaneously. Throughout your day, you absorb an enormous amount of information: sensory detail, emotional undertone, subtle social cues, patterns in your own behavior that never rises to full conscious awareness because there is simply too much of it. This information does not disappear. It is processed, associated, and integrated by the unconscious continuously, beneath the threshold of conscious attention. The nightly exercise creates a deliberate opening for this processed material to surface, not as raw data, but as the symbolic, image-based output the unconscious naturally produces. Second, symbolic thinking accesses patterns the analytical mind misses. The conscious mind, particularly when focused on a problem, tends to think linearly, step by step, logical sequence. But many of life's most important patterns, emotional dynamics, relational tensions, the underlying shape of a decision, are not linear. They are systemic, holistic, the kind of pattern that symbolic, image-based thinking is specifically suited to perceive. This is why insight through this kind of practice often feels different from insight reached through deliberate analysis. It arrives as a felt recognition. Oh, that's what's actually happening, rather than a conclusion reasoned step by step. Third, engaging unconscious material directly reduces its hidden influence. This is perhaps Jung's most clinically important insight. Material that remains entirely unconscious does not simply sit dormant. It influences behavior, mood, and decision-making from below conscious awareness, often producing patterns the conscious mind cannot explain or control. The repeated relationship pattern you cannot break, the recurring anxiety with no clear cause, the decision that felt wrong the moment you made it, for reasons you couldn't articulate. Jung believed that bringing unconscious material into direct, conscious engagement, exactly what this exercise does, begins to integrate that material, reducing the degree to which it operates as a hidden, unexamined force in your life. This is the deeper promise behind the exercise's name. Not that reality magically rearranges itself around you, but that as you integrate more of your own unconscious material, your perception, your decisions, and your patterns of behavior genuinely begin to shift, and a life shaped by integrated, examined material looks, from the outside, very different from a life shaped by hidden, unexamined material. That difference is what people mean when they say their reality changed. Part 7. What you might actually encounter. Let's talk honestly about what tends to arise during this practice. because expectation matters. You will likely, at some point, encounter what Jung called the shadow. This is one of his most important archetypal concepts, the disowned, rejected, often uncomfortable parts of yourself that you have pushed out of conscious identity because they did not fit the version of yourself you wanted to present. The shadow often appears, in active imagination, as a figure that feels unsettling, sometimes threatening, sometimes simply unpleasant to look at directly. The instinct, when this figure appears, is to look away, to end the exercise, to push the image back down. Jung's instruction was the opposite. The shadow, approached with genuine curiosity rather than fear, often contains exactly the material a person most needs to integrate. Not because the shadow is secretly good and you've been wrong to reject it, but because the energy used to keep it suppressed is energy unavailable for anything else. And integration, not suppression, is what frees that energy back into conscious use. You may also encounter what Jung called the anima, or animus, figures representing the contrasexual aspects of the psyche, often appearing as significant figures of the opposite gender, carrying particular emotional weight.